Well, let's start with a few points. One of the first things that's troublesome is that unlike what romanticism tells us, we are not pure, kind, loving beings simply on the lookout for a soulmate. We are deeply dangerous, and most of us are on the edge of insanity. This is not an exception. It's just what it means to be human. All of us are only just holding it together. We are dangerous to be around. We have all sorts of impulses, feelings, desires, which make us great trouble to be around. The only people we can think of as normal are people we've just met. Once we've met them a little bit more, we will soon realize that they are not normal. In other words, we are trouble to be around. We're a little bit crazy. This is compounded by the fact that anyone we're likely to get together with is also going to be crazy, and they won't be able to tell us how they're crazy. Their craziness will be an intimate part of their own biography, which we won't be able to get to by the normal kind of questions that we get addressed at a dinner date. I mean, one of the first things that we should be asking ourselves in a more psychologically aware society, one of the first questions you should ask anyone at a dinner date is, how are you mad? I'm mad like this. How are you mad? That should be a very standard question we ask each other over dinner. But it's seen as an insulting question. It isn't. Another reason why, of course, we're so unaware of our psychological dynamics is that until we start a big, long-term relationship, no one can be bothered to tell us. Our friends certainly can't. I mean, sometimes in relationships, when things are tricky, we say things like, well, Mary, my friend, or John, my friend, they don't seem to criticize me. Why are you criticizing me all the time? My mother doesn't criticize me. Well, the reason is mothers and friends don't care enough. They don't have to deal with you all the time. So they don't give you the vital feedback that only a lover deep in a relationship, probably a marriage, will ever tell you. So the information that is most relevant to our self-understanding is missing. Friends don't care, and lovers, when it gets too tricky, casual relationships just end because people can't be bothered to invest in the deep sort of in mutual enlightenment that should be going on in a relationship. So two disturbed people come together, that's going to be problematic. The other thing, of course, is that in the olden days, people used to get together according to a marriage of reason. So parents would get together, and reasonable reasons for getting together would be identified. His plot of land is next to yours, the same religion, or the castle, or whatever. Now, nowadays, we believe in instinct, that we should follow our instinct. Instinct should guide us to the person who will make us happy. The problem is, and this is really the drift, to summarize brutally, this is the drift of what psychoanalysis has taught us in the 20th century. Psychoanalysis has taught us that when we fall in love with people, we're essentially recreating a pattern of earliest childhood, that we learn about love in the bosom of the family. And when it comes to adult love, we are mirroring very much on top of this ancient story, which is generally inaccessible to our conscious control. Now, the problem is that when we love in adulthood, we are not necessarily drawn to people who will make us happy. We are drawn to people who will feel familiar. And very often, happiness and familiarity have drifted apart because the love we knew as children is not a love that was pure of certain rather unhealthy or troublesome dynamics. Maybe loving someone who was rather distant or whose mood we couldn't control or who we were slightly afraid of, etc. And so this explains how often you'll set up a friend with another friend, and they both seem so well suited on paper, according to reasonable criteria, and then the friend calls you up and they say, they were perfect, but I just didn't have that special feeling. And you think that special feeling is a surefire guide to happiness, but no. It really means that the person was probably a little bit too normal for your friend. They were a little bit too healthy. They didn't satisfy your friend's requirement for suffering. And therefore, we say, oh, they weren't that attractive, they were nice, but a little bit boring, or something. What I mean by a bit boring is we mean a little bit too healthy for me. They didn't fit my pattern of madness, so I had to let them go. So instinct guides us to some very troublesome characters, and we don't feel a special feeling until we've really locked horns with someone who can make us feel the kind of trouble that is familiar, that is beautifully familiar from childhood. The other thing that goes wrong, of course, is that in love, we have this idea that romanticism tells us you should be yourself in a relationship. Now, being yourself around another person is a curse we should spare anyone who we care about, because the full dimensions of our characters are really troublesome. But we have this idea that if you can't be yourself fully, you're not being honest. And honesty, the romantics tell us, is the gateway to true love. And so this sets up a really troublesome dynamic. And, we all feel it. You know how it is. in an early stage of a relationship, you've met somebody, you've shared all sorts of secrets, and they've said, oh, how nice and how pleasant. And so finally, the outside world, that scary place, has been humanized because you've met someone from the outside world who feels as you do about all sorts of things. And there's a tremendously liberating feeling in those early days of love. But then, and it's often about sex, let's be honest. Often you say things like, do you want to do that thing? And they go, yeah, I've always thought about that thing. You go, really? I've always been really into that thing, but no one was. And they go, yeah, I'm totally into it. Let's do that thing. And so it's really wonderful. It's freeing. It's liberating. And then one day you're in a restaurant, and maybe the relationship is 3 months in, and you say, oh, you know, that waiter person over there, that, you know, imagine if like, I don't know, like them and we, and it wouldn't be fun if like we invited them. And your partner, who's understood so much about you, your feelings about your mother, that funny thing that you talked about, they understand so much, and suddenly they're looking pretty serious and kind of upset. And you go, oh, whoa. And you suddenly feel that thing, which is a conflict between love and honesty. And most of us at that point go, you know what, I'll take the love. I'll ditch the honesty. I'm not going to go so much into what I really want to do with that person. I will draw up the drawbridge again, and the moment of loneliness begins. And of course, romanticism tells us this is a disaster, because romanticism tells us if you love someone, complete honesty. But then comes this thing with the waiter. So it's difficult. Okay, so the other thing that romanticism tells us is if you really love someone, and they really love you, you shouldn't use too many words. You will feel an intuitive understanding with someone. And you know, the miraculous moments in love are often about those where the other partner seems to understand you without having said anything. This is a disaster. Because this can only, it's very charming in the first 3 months. But long term, the idea that someone is going to understand you without you needing to speak or communicate is a disaster. It's a collective disaster that has marred love for millions of people. It's led to an outbreak of sulking. Because what is a sulk in love, other than a deep conviction that your lover should understand something, and they haven't understood, and that's why you're not going to tell them why you're upset. You're upset, but you're not going to tell them, and the reason you're not going to tell them because if they loved you, they would know why you were upset. So that's why you're going to bolt yourself in the bathroom, and you won't say what's wrong. Because a true lover knows what they would be able to read through the bathroom door what was wrong with you. The other thing that's really troublesome about romantic love is this belief that if you love somebody, and if someone loves you, they accept the whole of you. And that they never try to change you. And often there's very awkward moments when someone goes, you know, you really kind of have that funny thing like when you're eating cereal, there's this funny chewing noise. And the other one goes, hang on a minute, I thought you loved me. And they go, no, I do love you, but there's that chewing noise. And they go, you're always so critical. My mother's not so critical. My friends are, my ex-boyfriend, my ex-girlfriend is not so critical. And you go, I love you. I need to tell you about the cereal. And that is seen as a breach of love, a breach of the ground rules of love. It isn't. But we have the wrong idea of love. We need to go back to the ancient Greeks. The ancient Greeks had a much wiser vision of love. The ancient Greeks believed that love is an attraction to perfection and virtue and accomplishment. Whenever we see virtue and accomplishment, we feel a sensation of love. We're tolerant towards the bad, the imperfect, the fragile, the vulnerable. We tolerate it and we're kind to it, but we don't love it. We just put up with it. But the real sensation of love is focused on perfection and accomplishment. Now, the romantic view is contrary to that. It says you should love the whole thing. There is no such thing as a weakness, a vulnerability. All these things are equally lovable, and education has no place in love. Now, the ancient Greeks believed that when you love someone, you are embarked on a process of mutual education. You're trying to educate them, and they're trying to educate you. The problem is education goes so wrong in love most of the time nowadays because romanticism has made it seem illegal. Now, when is a teacher a good teacher? A good teacher is somebody who, first of all, feels relaxed. They feel it's legitimate for them to teach an audience. The audience feels it's legitimate to be in the student position, none of which exists in the conditions of love normally, in which you're trying to tell someone something. And now, why are we such bad teachers in love? Not just because we think it's illegitimate, because so much is at stake. You know, the best teachers don't really care about the progress of their students. If the students haven't understood, doesn't matter. You know, you'll get on to the next trigonometry class, doesn't matter. In love, we care so much, and so we're so hysterical. We're trying to teach someone something on the verge of a catastrophe in our own lives because we're haunted by the feeling in love, in long-term love, I've married the wrong person, therefore I've ruined my life. And that's not a good position to be in when you're trying to teach someone how to eat in a different way or make anecdotes in a different way. You're hysterical. You're going, the background thought is, I've ruined my life, I've married an idiot, and they've got to understand. So you shout and you scream and you humiliate, and of course no one's ever learned anything under conditions of humiliation. The moment you said anything humiliating, the lesson's over. They're not on your side, and they're offended. As we know from feedback forms, it's got to be 99% sweetness and light and honey and 1% criticism, then you've got a potential chance to educate. So we do terrible education. We don't know how to educate. We think that education is a breach of love rather than its beginning. All of us are so imperfect. Of course, our lover is going to find fault with us, and of course, they're going to try and improve us. But we have to legitimate the process of improvement, and at the moment, we don't at all, because we think it's a betrayal of the ground rules of love. What are the solutions? Well, we have to reinvent love. Now, we're in a tech environment, and we're so used to reinventing certain technological, political platforms. We have to invent the romantic and emotional basis upon which our lives are made. I'm very thrilled by this idea. Come see me later if you're interested in this plan. We have to reinvent love and how we love. The first thing we have to do is to get away from instinct. Of course, instinct doesn't work. Imagine if someone was saying, I'm performing a brain surgery later this afternoon. I'm going to be guided by instinct. I just have an instinct. Or I'm going to land an A380 tomorrow by instinct. Of course you wouldn't. You'd have ended up with disaster. It's bizarre that we continue to refuse the idea that we should be educated in the very basics of relationships. We need a more therapeutic. It's not that we should lower our expectations. It's that we should keep the expectations that we have, but create a therapeutic scaffolding around them so that we will be able to reach the heights which we legitimately seek in our relationships. Here are some of the things that I would put into a curriculum of love. This is some of what we need to know in order to be better lovers. The first thing we need to understand is, let's stop treating our partners as if they were adults, and let's start treating them like small children. The reason why this is so important is, when a small child does something wrong, let's imagine you've got a small child, you cook them dinner, they're 2 years old, 3 years old, you give them some broccoli and some schnitzel, etc. You put a plate down in front of them, and they just swipe it off and go, "Nah!" and start screaming. Now, what do you do as a modern parent? You don't hit them. You don't go, I'm so offended, I've a hard day at work, and now this, you're persecuting me. You don't say that. You go, oh, maybe my poor child's got a sore tooth, or maybe he's a bit jealous of his sister being born. Maybe that's kind of weighing on him. Maybe he's a little bit tired. That's why he's behaving like this. In other words, we're incredibly generous about our system of interpretation. We don't do this as adults because we think, well, the person's an adult. And of course, most adults look like adults, unfortunately. It would be so much more useful if we look like children. Because, you know, the great thing about breaking something, you've got a broken arm, right? Everyone can say, oh, you've got a broken arm. Oh, I'm so sorry, you've got a broken arm. Let me open the door, you've got a broken arm. If you've got a broken soul, a broken bit of your psyche, everyone thinks you're normal. But you want to go, no, I've got this thing that's broken. It doesn't look broken. So we don't look like children, but we are inside. And it's so, you know, we're so aware of how patronizing it is to be treated as younger than we in fact are, that we've neglected in a way how generous, how kind, how truly loving it is to treat someone as if they were younger than they are. Because this is really what it means to love, which is to be generous in the interpretation of the behavior of another person. The other thing that we need to get better at, of course, is interpreting whether somebody is evil or not for doing the things that they do. And for this, we need to learn humor. You know, often comedy is seen as an add-on, as sort of a game show entertainment thing. It's a vital resource in relationships. Because what humor does, think of all the great characters that we laugh about, like Larry David. Now, Larry David, if you met Larry David as he plays himself in Curb Your Enthusiasm, if you met him in life, you'd think this guy's a total idiot. You hate him, he's awful. But because of the humorous envelope in which he's presented to us by comic genius, you think that vital thing, he is a lovable idiot. And that's a sign of love. When you manage to move from seeing your partner as an idiot to seeing your partner as a lovable idiot, you have learned a vital lesson about love, which we all need to take on board. We need to remember, of course, humor is, secrets are okay. To try and reveal everything about yourself is wrong. If you're, let's say, only lonely with maybe 40% of your character, that's fine. You're doing very well. The idea that loneliness should end with a birth of love is completely wrong. You must not blame another person for not understanding every part of you. How could you expect them to? You don't even understand most of you. How could they mind read? No one is a mind reader, nor should they be expected to be. So, ladies and gentlemen, a quick rundown of the kinds of the kind of checklist that you should be making to know that you are ready for love. You know you're ready for love when you have gently understood that, of course, you are crazy. You have gently understood that, of course, your partner is crazy. You've gently understood that you don't really understand yourself, they don't understand themselves, and your communication is likely to be completely dire at the instinctive level, and you need to bring it on to a more therapeutic level. You need to understand that love is going to be accompanied by a lot of practical details. You won't be on holiday. You won't be with the waterfalls all the time or the lovely, beautiful clouds. That love is a practical venture, and that you will be unhappy a great deal of the time. Pessimism is often seen as the enemy of good things, and indeed it is in many ventures. But when you embark on the journey of love, pessimism, in fact, is the most generous and kindly emotion that you could direct towards yourself and your partner. That is the future of love that I've been sketching for you.